and one that's like all about books about Noah's Ark, believe it or not. So and it's just like those are what donors were enthusiastic about. So that's why they gave it. So some of our funding comes from that, from those areas, but mostly, it's state funding at a place like UCLA. State funding into and what comes from tuition and things like that.
Right. Do you also benefit from the Friends of the Library?
Sure. Yeah, we do. Um,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, and that would work. There's a certain, you can be a friend of the library. I forget how we do it. Whether if you donate anything, you become. I think that there's a certain level of donors that if you give so much a year, you become a friend of the library, and those monies get split up.
Yeah.
Unless the people who are giving it your markets for special collections, they get split up throughout the library. So it's not a huge source for us, but yeah, we do get some.
Okay. Um, all right, the next question, and we're almost done. uh,
You're doing fine. I'm totally fine. So it's
okay.
okay.
Awesome. Um, Now, does Special Collections report to YRL and the UC system as a whole?
Sort of. That it's mostly a UCLA um, entity. In fact, administratively, it's completely UCLA. But I do serve on a board called the University of California Heads of Special Collections, and it's a board. There's one representative per campus. The libraries coordinate. The libraries of the same campuses coordinate amongst themselves, and so each campus has a representative on this group, and we try to coordinate special collections activities for the whole system. So it's not a reporting relationship, but it's like a coordinated group.
Right.
But in general, my priorities are UCLA,
Okay.
and we collaborate where we can, and it makes sense. And we have a good partnership with the other campuses.
Right.
But I report to UCLA.
Okay. The next question is, how is the library governed?
Hmm. Ooh. All right. So, um, I'm trying to like whether I will. Do you want how it's supposed to be governed or how it's actually governed? So
Okay.
so there is theoretically a shared governance model, and that's throughout UCLA. And by shared governance, there is the way it works is that there's a university librarian who is at the dean level, and he, and then soon it's going to be a she, is responsible for administering the entire library. There's also a group called the Librarians Association of the University of California, so it's a system-wide group, but then there's an LA chapter of it, and I believe that group is set up to be at least advisory towards to the university librarian, and I believe that he has to meet with them once a month. But to be honest, I think it's advisory. Well, maybe advisory is a good reason. Is a good way to say it. Like my sense is that he doesn't take a lot of advice from that
Oh
group.
no.
So that's um, there's an interesting tension in. So UCLA as a whole, as a university, is the shared governance model. So like faculty generally do have a say in a lot of the major decisions that go on, and actually do have power to be obstructionist towards the administration if they really don't like something, and then they do have power to push initiatives forward, sort of like based on the charter of how the university is supposed to work. But but in libraries, it's just a little different, right? Because if you're a faculty member, you got your area of specialization and you teach and then you do research, and a lot of that work is just super independent, right? Like, it's not like a history department doesn't function, like they don't work collaboratively to put out great history projects as a department, right? They're like there's a combination of a sum of its parts. So, if they 10 faculty members, the research output is what they all do, individually, and maybe there's a little collaboration. But in a library setting, right, we're a big organization that sort of has to align people's work towards broader goals.
Right.
And so, being a librarian in this way, there's some similarities to being a faculty member because you need some expertise, and some of the work is kind of independent from one. But really, the ways that library works, we kind of need to all be on the same page as an organization. And so sometimes there's a tension there between how librarians think it should be and how it actually is. But a good organization, whether it be a library or, an insurance agency or something, understands that it's the people who do the work on the ground. They may not have all the answers, but they understand the work really well, and they need to at least be consulted and brought into decision-making processes. So yeah. But that was a long answer. It seemed like a simple question, but another way to think about how the library is organized is that there's an organizational chart, and it's actually quite hierarchical. And I'm the boss of several people, theoretically, the power to say.
Mm-hmm.
but there's also treated. There are strong labor unions that sort of keep workers' rights, sort of in the front of people's consciousness. So. Did you work there only as a student, or did you work after?
No, I worked there as a student for 3 years.
Okay, so you got to see it from that perspective, but not as a staff member. Yeah.
Right.
So when did you finish? Were you you there when Carlos started?
Yes, I was.
Okay, so it's fairly, and so you worked with Val
And Antigone.
and David and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Antigone. Good. Okay. They're great.
Yeah, they're very nice. They're great people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be interviewing Val as well.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
She's awesome. You'll get different answers from Val than me, but she'll probably be right.
Let's see. Okay, now there's this question, and it asks how the organization is. I know we were talking about structure. They're also asking about multiple branches, so I'm guessing it's do all of the departments at YRL communicate, and then do you then, I guess, talk to the university librarian when it comes to structure?
So, is it like kind of a question about what the organizational structure is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there is a university librarian, and then there's a deputy university librarian that I'll give you the theory about how it works, and if we have a second conversation, I'll sort of tell you how. But anyway, the deputy university. So the university librarian position is really it should be an externally focused position, right?
Mm-hmm.
Should be out meeting donors, building the library on campus, doing high vision stuff, but not doing a lot of operational things. So how the place runs day to day. And so the deputy, in a system like the deputy university librarian's job is to sort of run the library on a day-to-day basis. So you have to take care of the day-to-day concerns that come up and make sure everything's running well. So the deputy university librarian reports to the university librarian, and then there are also 4 associate university librarians. One for the medical campus, um, one for collection management and scholarly communications. So collection management is like acquisitions, cataloging, preservation, those sorts of things. And then scholarly communication is both electronic collections and then all of the stuff that comes up around intellectual property, and then working with faculty to help them through issues with how to use our stuff. Then we have an AUL for uh, digital initiatives and information technology, so for systems, and then one for academic services, and that's who I report to. And in his portfolio is the college library, and they have the college library also has the title of Director of Teaching and Learning Services, so everything we do to really help undergrads, and maybe grad students a little bit too. And then the collections research and instructional services librarian, so those are all the subject specialists. He has access services, so that's where he worked. The East Asia Library, and then the Arts and Music Library, and then special collections. So it's kind of in some ways, it's a catch-all portfolio. But anyway, and then there are department heads for all the units, and we report to the Associate University Librarians. And then, my department, I've got, at least a couple layers down below that, too.
Okay. Wow.
It's a little complicated. That would be, I can send you the org chart for at least the top level org chart for the library, too, if you remind me in the email, and that'll sort of help you.
Okay. I'm going to start making a list.
Yeah.
Okay, another question is, now, do you do your own hiring, or is the human resources from YRL do the hiring for special collections?
Well, we collaborate, right? We're in charge of developing job descriptions and articulating what we need, and then we would work with them to get it in the proper format to make sure, like, all of the sort of human resources concerns are addressed. Then they handle a lot of, like, the mechanics of recruiting, like putting the job description out there, collecting resumes, talking to candidates before, we look at resumes. So they collect all the resumes, and then we form a search committee. And this is for a professional position, and in general, someone from human resources is always on the search committee. But then it's led by somebody, generally the hiring manager, although it doesn't have to be. And then, it's a collaboration in which they will manage, a lot of the details, like the scheduling interviews and things like that. But then when we interview, it's a lot more, with special collections folks than with human resources. So, it's a collaboration, but we're highly involved.
Right.
Because we're the experts, right? And we can truly evaluate. My human resources staff wouldn't know as an archivist from a good, accountant. But that might be a bit of an over. But they don't necessarily. They shouldn't. That's not their job. Their job is to be, have expertise in general on, like, the rules of how things work and, like, mechanisms for recruiting and stuff like that, just so we don't get ourselves into legal trouble and things like that. So,
right.
And then they make the, if it's a job offer, they're the ones that make the offer. And I should say that it's the university librarian's final decision on any appointments. So the role of the department is to make a proposal to him or now her, and then formally it's his appointment offer to make. It would be highly unusual for him to overrule the search committee. I think maybe it's happened, but, because then he would have to, it's just highly unusual. But anyway, so that's kind of how it works.
Okay. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, what are the ratios of professional support or unclassified